All right, guys, we are live here on Marlins 9. As always, I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. Thought I'd open it up for the mailbag this week. It's a solo podcast. And if you're watching this on Twitter or on YouTube, go ahead, hop in and leave a comment, leave a question, anything you want me to cover. Had a couple good questions come in this week from a couple individuals, and we're going to tackle those issues. But right now, 2024 season in review. It's been a rough season. It's been a rough season to say the least for the Marlins. 29-52 at the halfway point of the season, and it is a season where, coming off a playoff berth, the expectations were mixed among fans. A lot of fans expected the Marlins to return to the mean and really slump, and a lot of fans wanted to see them go for the postseason again. So I, for one, wanted to see them go to the postseason, at least make an effort. Unfortunately, the front office did not agree with me, did not think that they could or should build upon last year. And so we are in a situation now where the Marlins are sitting at, 23 games under 500, just about. Was it more than that? My math is off right now. But point being is that they are completely out of it. It's not July. And as a Marlins fan, you have to ask yourself, why do we continue to watch? What do you guys, as Marlins fans, why do you continue to watch this team? For me, it's all about the development of players, the development of the pitching staff, to see if we can find anybody that will contribute in the future to a meaningful, competitive organization. Now, that being said, the trade deadline is coming up. The trade deadline is coming up in about a month. And if you've been listening to the podcast, watching the podcast on YouTube, obviously I don't usually do live streams, but today I felt like I'd mix it up. It's not going to be a long episode. I anticipate no more than 25, 30 minutes. But the trade deadline is coming up. Joe Frisaro has been on the podcast multiple times. I've had the pleasure of speaking with him. And the question he presented is, who are the Marlins planning to trade? Who, if anybody, can the Marlins trade and receive prospects, receive anybody that will contribute to the future? Because you look at the roster right now, obviously it's a flawed roster, or you wouldn't be, last place in the National League East and completely out of the wild card race this early. But there are a couple pieces you could possibly get some quality return for. Obviously, the impending free agents have got to be moved. If you're the front office, you have to try to move these guys. And that's namely Josh Bell, and that's also Tanner Scott, who, in my opinion, is right now the best reliever on the market. I think Josh Bell is a little bit more tricky considering the market and considering the fact that, he has a $16 million salary this year. So the prospect return you would get would be diminished if you don't pay most of that salary if you're the Marlins. I look at the Luis Arias trade from earlier in the season, and they paid essentially the rest of his contract this season. They paid the $10 million for this year. They ate the money in order to get a better return. Of course, that return is scrutinized by a lot of fans, including myself, but they felt that was the best return they could get. You're not going to get anything close to that with Josh Bell, just to make things clear. He's a free agent. He is certainly not as good of a hitter as Arias. He's limited defensively, but I anticipate there being a team willing to give the Marlins a high risk, high reward, like a teenager, in rookie ball in single A. And the Marlins, it's a lottery ticket at that point. I anticipate that to be the case if they can move him. They should be doing anything they can to move him. And if I were the Marlins, I would be paying that salary as well. Just eat the money, eat the 16 million. At this point, you need every player you can get on this team. You really do, in this organization. Tanner Scott. Okay, Tanner Scott is a guy who, coming off of last season when he was just dominant, one of the best closers in the game, has been even better, I would argue, this season. Been even better. Um, Left-hander, throws high gas, 99, 100 on every fastball, got the big sweeping slider. It's a prototypical bullpen arm that teams at the deadline will want. Like, the demand is there. Now, he is also a free agent, so the return isn't going to be extremely high, um, just based on the limited amount of control. It's a true rental. It is a true rental, and that's okay. But the Marlins have to be looking to trade him now. And when I say now, I don't mean in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean tomorrow. I mean, Sunday. Like, as soon as you can, as soon as you can find a deal for this guy that you like. Don't get too greedy. And that is spoken of because I think back to 2018, and diehard fans know this year it was another losing season for the Marlins, but they had a really good closer in Kyle Bearclaw. Kyle Bearclaw, well, he was a really good closer. He was. In 2018, he was lights out. Just about this time, his ERA was sub 2, just like Tanner Scott. Had a big fastball, good breaking ball, and he was stepped into the closing role really after Steve Cishek, the AJ Ramos combo, and Kyle Bearclaw suddenly is your closer, pitching deep in high leverage situations, and they held on to him so long that, if you remember, there was a game against Tampa Bay. They were at the Trop, and for whatever reason, Don Mattingly leaves him in there for 2 innings. His pitch count is upwards of 30, 35. It's approaching 40. Gives up a walk-off grand slam to the Rays. Does not get traded at the deadline. That outing in particular hurt his stock so badly that teams, they just couldn't get a deal done. Ends up getting traded. If you remember back then, they had the trade waiver deadline, that whole thing at the end of August. He gets traded in that time frame to the Washington Nationals for cash considerations, or international bonus pool signing money, essentially just money. No prospect was acquired in that trade. And Kyle Bearclaw was a guy that trade mocks and all that thing was saying, okay, trade him now, get a good prospect return. Like, he could get you 1 or 2 good guys. And they did it. They held on to him, and inevitably it was too long. They held on to him way too long, and the Marlins paid the price. I don't want to see that same set of circumstances happen with Tanner Scott. He's been lights out all season. What if the control issues suddenly flare up and he walks 3 guys in a row, gives up a base hit, and it's just everything goes downhill from there? You don't want to see that. So I want to see the Marlins trade him sooner rather than later. I've said this for a couple months now. I get it. You want to wait until the deadline to maximize his return when teams are getting more desperate. But at the same time, guys, why did you trade Luis Arias May 4th? You can't really have the same logic there, because if Luis Arias is still hitting in Miami and he's still healthy and doing what he does, there would have been a demand for him at the deadline. And it makes me wonder, could the prospect return have been greater at the deadline if they hadn't traded him early in May? So, that being said, with Tanner Scott, I love seeing him in a Marlins uniform, but for the future of this organization, you have to trade him, and you have to get 1 or 2 guys that, have some high potential that could contribute for this team in the future. At this point, if you're building the farm, you got to start collecting guys. You got to start stacking depth down in single A, down in double A, and get these guys developed. It all starts with the development of these guys, but develop them into major league guys. Because for me, I want to see the Marlins target major league ready players. I've been outspoken about this before. If you were going to trade Jesus Luzardo in the offseason, the Orioles offered Joey Ortiz. You didn't take that deal. Jesus Luzardo traded for Joey Ortiz. Suddenly you have your third baseman of the future. And he's an all-star candidate and should be the National League starter in the all-star game over Manny Machado. No doubt about it. But you didn't. So now you're kind of pivoting and you're trading for teenagers. Obviously, with the Arias trade, the headliner was the kid Dylan Head in Single A, who's now out for the season. So you're still going to go with that approach if you're Peter Bendix. I don't see why he would change it. It's not something I agree with, but that's what's going to happen. Now, the season in review, 2024, it's been rough. It's been, I think one word you could just give one word to describe the season would be injuries, just injuries, plain and simple. The pitching staff has been decimated, absolutely decimated by injuries from top to bottom. I mean, we are talking guys that did not plan on starting at the beginning of the season, and then they got hurt. Like from top to bottom, Sandy Alcantara was already done. Yori Perez, we thought he was going to go. He was done. Tommy John surgery. And then guys step up like Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers, at the end of last season, nobody thought he was going to be a starter. Well, he turned out to be probably the best Marlins starter, and then he gets hurt. So guys are dropping down left and right. Edward Cabrera, is his time in Miami done? He's been hurt yet again. Braxton Garrett now is dealing with an injury. I mean, the list goes on and on. And now every week you're starting to see a rotation composed of Kyle Tyler, Roddery Munoz, Yanni Chirinos. I mean, the de facto ace of the staff is Trevor Rogers. Let that sink in. Trevor Rogers is your de facto ace. It's rough. It has been absolutely rough. And not that it really matters, because the Marlins' record is so poor and the offense has been yet again so poor, and they've already committed to this rebuild. So I don't know if all those healthy pitchers really would have made a difference, because the only offensive acquisitions you made were Christian Bethancourt, who's been DFA'd, and Tim Anderson, who's been a shell of himself dating back to last season. They didn't put effort in the offseason, and in the regular season, it paid. They reaped the consequences. That's what happens. So now it's all about maximizing your return for prospects, getting as much as you can. We're going to have an episode, I believe, next week, and detailing some possible trades, some possible prospects that we'd like to see the Marlins get in return for some deals. So we're going to mock up some deals. We're going to have a special guest on next week, but today just a solo pod, kind of detailing the season review. It's been rough. Like I said, pitching staff injured early on. The injuries continued. The bright spots, we'll get into the bright spots now. Brian De La Cruz and Jazz Chisholm. Brian De La Cruz has been awesome. He is a guy with multiple years left of control that the Marlins could possibly trade this deadline. He could possibly be traded and get a decent return back. Really having a great year, has legitimate 30 home run power, is on pace for at least 30 bombs, which is awesome. It's awesome to see. I'm a huge De La Cruz fan. He makes the game fun. He makes watching the Marlins fun. In this season, De La Cruz, watching him hit is fun. Jazz Chisholm has stayed healthy all season long. And, I know there was a list that came out with his peers saying that he's one of the most overrated players in Major League Baseball. I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I think that this season in particular, when Jazz stays healthy, he is one of the most electric, talented combo of power and speed that the game has. He can steal. He can hit for power. He can change the game in more ways than one. Scouts will put him in center field. Some scouts say he still can be in the middle infield. Do you trade Jazz? I think you do. I think you should be looking for a trade return for Jazz Chisholm Jr. because it would be big. It would be big. And now that Jesus Luzardo is done for the foreseeable future, he's on the 60-day injured list. You know, it's probably the best trade chip you have. Him and Tanner Scott. Maybe there's a situation where a team with a hole in the outfield, a hole in center field, and who doesn't need another high octane arm out of the bullpen? You package those two together. You got a rental in Tanner Scott, and you have Jazz Chisholm. Like, that's a good trade right there. That is a good trade package. You know, the White Sox, there's trade rumors with Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert Jr., but you have Jazz Chisholm right there as an option in the outfield. Depends what the Marlins will do. This deadline is huge. Now, we're going to get into the mailbag a little bit. I mentioned this was a mailbag episode. So one of the questions I had, I'm going to pull it up right here. Is Max Meyer destined to be a reliever? Is Max Meyer destined to be a reliever, and when do we see him again? So I'm going to answer the first part. I believe Max Meyer can still start in Major League Baseball. I believe he can still be a viable starter in Major League Baseball. The slider is that good. The fastball is very good at velocity. Like, it is a good fastball. The issue has always been the third pitch, that changeup. How he is developing that changeup when he is down in the minor leagues. The issue, I believe, with the Marlins is that they don't want to rush Max Meyer to essentially eat up a lot of innings in a season when there's really no point for him to contribute. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing in the sense that it shows me the Marlins are protecting him because they still believe in his ability to be a starter. Okay. Now in the minors, it's been a little bit rough in terms of statistics. ERA right now is at 6. He's pitched in 11 games, but 39 innings, 46 strikeouts. Okay, 46 strikeouts. Still has swing and miss stuff. And it makes me wonder, the human element of this with Max Meyer is how much of it is mental. You know, when he got sent down from the big leagues back to AAA, that had to hurt. I mean, he had just dominated the Atlanta Braves, and now he gets optioned. It's like, man, what do you want him to do? Like, what do you want me to do as a pitcher? So mentally, that has to take a toll on him. But to answer your question, I would anticipate Max Meyer being a starter and getting his turn to audition, getting, a nice stretch of hopefully, 6-7 starts somewhere probably after the trade deadline in August or September. Maybe start the rest of the way there and get 7-8 good opportunities to see what he has and how that changeup has developed in the at the major league level. The other issue is marketing the team. Okay. Obviously, this has been a problem for years now with the Marlins getting enough bodies in the stadium and putting themselves in a position to gain a high attendance number. It's not something they've ever done well. But if Jazz is traded, and it's already a struggle to sell tickets, how do the Marlins market the team to get people to games? I honestly, the honest answer to that is I don't think you can. I don't think there is really anything more that the Marlins can do this season to market the team and bring people in. I think 2024 is a season where you just take it on the chin. You're eating it. You are eating the punches right now. And if Jazz is traded, you're going to continue to eat the punches because it's going to get worse. There's another piece of your offense that is gone. Another piece of your offense is gone. And suddenly you're looking at a situation where, I mean, already they're on a pace to lose over 100 games. How much, you know, I guess, effort are you going to put into marketing this team when the fans have already checked out? I mean, I'm one of the biggest fans there are and one of the most optimistic fans, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't watch this team every single day. I'm not gonna sit there and watch 9 innings and take up 2.5 hours every single day. There's just no point right now. Obviously, I'm still gonna watch them, but if it's gonna be an everyday thing, there's a lot other things to do right now. Everybody has different lives, but like I said, I'm watching this for the personal development. The losses and the wins don't especially matter. Yesterday, the Marlins beat the Phillies. They went up into Philly, scored 7. That was great to see. Jake Berger homered, Brian De La Cruz, bases clearing double. Those individual performances matter. But to sit back and say, "Oh, that win like gave me such a feeling of happiness and joy, and it meant something," it really doesn't. I'll take it. I'll take it. But the Marlins aren't good. And I want this team to compete. I want this team to go back into the postseason. Postseason baseball is different. It feels different. The wild card race, a division race, all of that feels so much better when your team is in it. How can this team put themselves in a position to return to the postseason? And right now, you have to trade who you can trade. You have to make smart trades, and you have to draft well. You have to draft well, which is why this upcoming draft is so crucial. Is so crucial. And the guy, I'm not a draft expert, but one of the guys I'm looking for in this upcoming draft, and I'm sure we're going to have an episode where we kind of break this down a little bit more, but Christian Moore from Tennessee. I was watching the College World Series this past week. Christian Moore is a guy who I would be very happy with if he somehow made it down to number 16, I believe it is, and get selected by the Marlins. I think he is an elite bat. He shows elite traits at the plate and he can hit the ball extremely hard. He's playing second base, can play that infield, and would be a guy that I believe college bat, the Marlins could advance very quickly through the system. So Christian Moore for Tennessee, I would be absolutely ecstatic to have in this organization. But we're going to get into that and kind of break down some more names in another episode. And we're going to wrap this up, guys. Just kind of talking about this Philly series. I think it's kind of funny. The Phillies and the Marlins. Phillies fans always have a fear of the Marlins when they aren't good. There's something about the Marlins, the bottom feeders, that can go into Philly and win games when they're a bad team. I don't know what it is. They go into Philly yesterday. Zach Wheeler's on the mound, and they go ahead and put up 7 runs. Like, make it make sense. It's kind of funny. It's baseball. Baseball's an interesting sport sometimes. But right now they're in action. 0-0. Kyle Tyler is on the mound so far. Hasn't allowed a run yet, but who knows? Things will change. But that's going to do it for today. It's a quick episode this week, but I hopefully that answered some of your guys' questions. And thank you guys for listening. This is the live stream, but of course it's always going to be on Spotify, Apple, and regular YouTube as well if you don't catch it live. So thank you guys, and as always, let's go fish.